10 years ago, Omaha was stunned by a brutal and mysterious murder. Until this day, investigators have not located the body of Jessica O'Grady. O'Grady's family says they've come to terms that she's gone, but still need answers. She was an honor student and just 19 years old when she made a phone call just before midnight on May 10th, 2006, saying she was heading to 120th and Blondo Streets, never to be heard from again. That night, O'Grady went to visit Christopher Edwards, a boy she had been flirting with. Here's a local report.
Christopher Edwards, the man convicted of killing O'Grady, has never said what happened in this house, how a mattress became soaked in blood, what became of Jessica. The unanswered questions still haunt.
We have the right to know that. That's the final piece of the entire puzzle.
And as Edwards tries to overturn his conviction, Stanzel has one reaction.
Appeal all you want. Let us put her to rest.
Until then, Jessica's family stays strong and sends this message to young teens about awareness and domestic violence.
You may not know that this person that you think is your friend and that you are close to could have the tendency to do something like that to you. We certainly, wouldn't have expected that.
TikToker @CrimeQueen has her own take on the story. Let's check her out.
Person's case is going to have your brain going places you don't want it to go. Warning. Been warned, now let's get into this case. Jessica O'Grady worked as a waitress at a local steak restaurant. She soon wanted to pursue a career in childcare and was at the end of her sophomore year in college. On the night of May 10th, 2006, Jessica invited some girlfriends over to her apartment to hang out and talk about their plans for the summer. They ordered pizza, watched some movies, just hanging out doing what girls do. Some point during this night, she gets a text message from a guy named Chris. She didn't specify what exactly the messages said, but as soon as they got done talking, she got up and told everybody in the house, hey, I'm leaving to go to Chris's house. They don't make too big of a deal about it. They then say that Jessica went and got in the shower, told them bye, and then she left at around 11:30 p.m. Everybody assumed that the Chris she was talking about was Chris Edwards. He was a co-worker of Jessica's at the local steak restaurant she worked at, and also a fellow student at the university they all attended. Like I said, Jessica left at around 11:30 p.m. 2 days later, when she hadn't returned home and wasn't returning any phone calls, her friends and family report her missing to police. Police usually know within 24 to 48 hours if a person is actually missing because they end up turning up. However, Jessica's case was different. They find Jessica's car abandoned at the restaurant she worked at. Upon initial review of the vehicle, they noticed that her car is completely gutted clean, not a single piece of trash inside. This worried Jessica's friends almost immediately. They said Jessica was not the type to keep her car super clean. Investigators go to speak with the last person that she went to go see, which was Chris Edwards. Chris said he never seen Jessica that night, and that he went to go see a movie with friends, which is an alibi that checked out. They even went to the movie theater that Chris said he attended and asked for surveillance footage, and this footage showed Chris leaving the movie theater with his friends around the time that he said. Chris said he didn't even know Jessica was supposed to come over that night. Then police uncover a crucial piece of evidence. Jessica may be pregnant. They get word that Jessica had recently taken a pregnancy test at one of her friends' house, and this test came back positive. Then police find out that there is another Chris that Jessica had been seeing a few months prior, Chris Ryan. So which Chris was she going to see when she left her apartment that night? Chris Edwards or Chris Ryan? Police start to speculate that maybe the stress of her finding out she was pregnant prompted her to leave, and she was just trying to clear her head. But then again, Jessica didn't take any of her personal items with her. She's not having any contact with friends that she usually talks to on a daily basis. They go back to the night that Jessica went missing, and her friend said that she left at around 11:30 p.m. One of her friends got a text from her an hour later at around 12:30 p.m. that said, no shenanigans for Jessica tonight. Her friend said that shenanigans was a code word Jessica used for sex. Police then try to think about cell phone pings, which is whenever you can locate where a phone was whenever it sent a message or made a call. Sadly, this leads to a dead end, as none of the cell phone towers around there had any records of Jessica sending a text message or making a call. They take their attention back to whoever Jessica was meeting up with on the night of May 10th. One of the two Chris's, her most recent boyfriend was Chris Edwards. Chris Ryan was a man she had been seeing at one point, but according to friends, it had been like 4 to 5 months since she had even had any contact with him. But investigators still want to follow up and have a talk with him. They meet with Chris Ryan, and he said that he had not spoken with Jessica in forever. There was no phone records of them having any communication. There were no text messages. It was pretty obvious that Chris Ryan wasn't the one to be looking at. They're running out of places to look until they get word that Chris Edwards, her most recent boyfriend, was seeing multiple other women while he was with her. He cheated on her frequently. One of the women that he was fooling around with was named Michelle. Michelle and Jessica actually knew of each other, and Michelle is actually pregnant too, just like Jessica. Jessica had actually already told Chris about this pregnancy and that he was indeed the father of the baby, and she had no plans of terminating this pregnancy. She planned to keep it. Police decide to re-interview Chris, and he does something quite unusual. As a detective or investigator, you are trained to notice little bitty things that regular people probably wouldn't. The tiniest little piece of information can mean so much. And Chris spoke about Jessica in the present, but also in the past tense. Instead of saying, oh, Jessica is he kept saying, oh, Jessica was here, Jessica was like this. He was using certain phrases and statements about Jessica that you would typically use when someone is no longer here on this earth. At this time, Chris is living with his aunt in her basement in Omaha. Police go to Chris's aunt's house to look around to see if they find anything out of the ordinary. Police ask Chris, is there anything in here that you would prefer us to not look at? Chris is like, oh, well, I'd rather you not look at my bed, which is going to immediately send up red flags. Why don't you want us looking at your bed? Chris was persistent. Don't look at my bed. Go to part 2 for the rest of the story. Part 2 about Jessica O'Grady. Chris Edwards is persistent that these investigators do not look at his bed. They ask him again, what were you doing on the night that Jessica went missing? He repeated his alibi, saying that he did go to the movies. And in his bedroom, investigators look at the ceiling and noticed that there were parts of the ceiling that were different shades than the rest. And there were small stains underneath the paint of the ceiling. They're red. In fact, there's blood all over the ceiling. They go to Chris and they're like, well, hey, there's blood in your room. He initially said that he cut his finger, which sounded completely absurd. You cut your finger and there's blood on the ceiling? Be for real. Crime scene investigator Joshua Connolly said that there was actually so much blood on the ceiling that it would have taken at least 2 to 3 coats to cover it up. They immediately call for backup. They call for extra crime scene investigators, policemen show up, and it's the middle of the night. They had the entire road lit up like a state fair surrounding Chris's aunt's house. They got the news team outside. People are coming out their houses, out the woodwork. I mean, like, it's going crazy. Investigators spray luminol, and this is a substance that you use to try to uncover more blood. They return their attention to Chris's mattress, which he definitely did not want them looking at. When they flip over this mattress, the bottom of it had a red stain on it that was so big it was covering pretty much the entire mattress. The amount of blood that was on that mattress, no human was surviving with that amount missing from their body. Now, after looking at that picture, guess what he said? He goes, oh, that was menstrual blood. One of the crime scene investigators that was at the scene actually laughed at him about this and was like, yeah, no, it's not. Like, who are you kidding? In the garage, they found even more evidence that something horrific had happened here. In the trunk of his vehicle, they found transfer blood. Transfer blood just means that something was put into the trunk that had blood on it. They cut the chunk out of Chris's ceiling from his bedroom that had blood on it, and then also cut a big chunk out of the mattress that had blood on it as well. They want to know if it matches to Jessica O'Grady, but it's going to be very difficult because they do not have a DNA profile on her. So they go to her apartment to get items that belong to her. They get a hairbrush to get hair out of. They also get her toothbrush, and then they also get a pair of panties. The DNA testing confirmed what they already suspected. The blood that was in Chris's room was that of Jessica O'Grady's. Due to how the blood was splattered on the ceiling, it was apparent that whatever did this was a knife, a large knife at that. This sent chills down my spine, but they described it as a sword. When they go back to Chris's aunt's house, they find something that was not there prior. In his closet were 2 large swords. These swords that he had in particular were called Bangkok battle swords, the type used in martial arts performances. The swords appeared to be clean, but they wanted to test them anyway to see if there were any traces of any human blood on them. And horrifically, there were traces of human blood and skin on these swords. The thought that he had taken these large, so wide of swords and stuck them in somebody is blasphemy. The blood on the swords was also ID'd back to Jessica O'Grady. He is taken to jail and charged with first-degree murder. He stands his ground, says that he did not take the life of Jessica, but investigators still had to prove that Jessica was indeed deceased and not just missing, because they don't have a body. They showed to the courtroom the amount of blood that was on this mattress. Whoever released this blood was not still alive. There was just no way. Investigators believe that Chris had no real interest in Jessica O'Grady. He just wanted to sleep with her. And when she got pregnant, this caused huge problems because he was already in a relationship with a girl named Michelle and he got her pregnant. And Michelle was the girl that he liked more than Jessica. He actually wanted to be in a relationship with Michelle. Prosecutors believe that on the night Jessica went missing, on May 10th, 2006, Jessica was at her apartment enjoying her night hanging out with friends, and Chris texted her and asked her to come meet up with him. Even though Chris went to the movies, his movie ended in enough time for him to be able to meet back up with Jessica that night at his aunt's house before midnight. They believe that Jessica went inside of Chris's aunt's home and they obviously discussed the status of their so-called relationship arrangement. And Chris realized that no matter what, between Michelle and Jessica, that he was going to have to supply for 2 children. They believed that she was going to stay the night that night, and Chris was just in his thoughts through the entire night, like, oh my god, I got 2 babies on the way. I don't want to do this. So let's get rid of one of the problems. Forensic evidence showed that Chris swung this sword at least 7 times. The traces of Jessica's blood in his trunk showed that he took her body from the house and put it into his trunk. What he did with her next, they don't know. When he was done disposing of her, he went and drove her vehicle to her work and dumped it there. Then went home and at some point tried to clean up the mess, but there was just way too much blood. There was just way too much. They actually tried to make a deal with Chris in court and said that if you show us where her body is, we will lighten your sentence, because he was sentenced to 100 years to life. Chris chose to stay quiet. This would be the first no body murder conviction in Nebraska history. They don't have a body, but they have a conviction. Chris Edwards is still in prison, and Jessica O'Grady's body has still not been found after 18 years. In my opinion, her body's not far. Chris Edwards was sloppy. He left all the blood in the house. I mean, there was blood everywhere. And from the evidence, he didn't drive far. He had friends who seen him the next day. None of his phone records showed that he left town. I also forgot to mention they found a dirty shovel in his garage that had fresh dirt on it. He most likely buried her. She's in that town. She's still there.
Okay, everyone, thanks for watching Latte and Tea's Small Town Secrets. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for new true crime, mystery, and the paranormal. Please, take care.